So this is getting to know your camp. Thanks. Okay. Good evening. We've got some new faces. Thanks for coming out. We appreciate you coming. We have some new faces and new people showing up, so it might be time to refresh our memories on just the basics of photography. What did I push? I didn't mean to do that. Did I do that? Anyway, whether it's a DSLR or your mirrorless camera, the controls are basically the same. They might be in a different location, but you should be able to control the same functions on the different makes and models of cameras. There might be buttons, there might be dials, or it might be something that you touch on the screen that will get you to where you go. Basically, any changes you're going to be making on your camera are going to either change what the camera is recording, how the camera records it, or when the camera records it. And whether it's digital or film, it's the same basic concept. On the back here, you see just at a glance, you can see the different how the camera is set. If you're looking at the screen, it tells you the exposure settings that the photographer has chosen. It tells you the file format that the camera is shooting in, and we'll get back to that later. Focus mode, the exposure scale, and I actually forgot to put a slide in about that. We can discuss that later. And all the different, my brain's gone. Your settings, your ISO, your aperture, your shutter speed. What are those called? My camera said there's another word that'll hit me tonight, and I'll call you all on the phone. And then up at the top, you've got the diopter, and Tony and I actually talked about this the other day, and that changes basically the focus of the eyepiece you're looking through. So if I see a lot of people with glasses in the audience, you can change the screen or the eyepiece to kind of help you see a sharper image as you're looking through. So that's something you can help. We've had the discussion before, but it's worth going over again because this is basically what photography revolves around, is the exposure triangle. You have three different ways to record or to change how much light is being recorded on either the sensor or the film that's in your camera. The top scale, you have the aperture, which is there's an iris inside your lens that opens and closes to control the amount of light that's coming into the camera. You can use the shutter speed, which is how long the film or the digital sensor is being exposed to the light, or the ISO or ASA that is that measures the sensitivity, right, of the light to your medium. And we'll go into those in depth later, but just remember there is a triangle and they are all interconnected. Back in the film days, they referred to the ISO or ASA as the speed of the film. The higher the number, the more sensitive the film or the sensor is to light. ISO is the International Standards Organization. ASA was American Standards Association, I think. They're the exact same number. 400 ISO is 400 ASA. There was also another number on film that was the DIN number. I honestly don't remember what that stood for, but that was a whole different scale, and we're not using those anymore. The aperture is also people hear people call that the f-stop. And again, that's the iris that's opening inside the lens, just like the iris in your eye that controls the amount of light coming in. And the f-stop has to do with the diameter of the opening versus the total diameter of the lens. And I don't know the math on it. If you Google it, if you're that curious, it'll explain how it's done. That's above my pay grade on mathematics. And then again, the shutter speed is how long the sensor of the film is exposed to the light. And so the more light that hits the medium, the brighter the picture is going to become. There are trade-offs and benefits and detriments to each. With your ISO and your ASA, The higher you go with those, the grainier, noisier the image becomes. And we'll see some examples of grain here in a little bit. The aperture, you use that to control, basically the main control there is depth of field. The smaller the opening, the higher the depth of field is. And then shutter speed, you can either stop the action or blur the action, depending what story you want to tell with your image. And again, we'll see examples of that. And if you've changed one aspect, you need to change one or both of the other legs to make sure you're getting an equivalent exposure. So if you stop the lens down and make the aperture smaller, which is a higher number, you've got to either increase the ISO or increase the shutter speed or both to compensate for the change you've made. The tops of the three major camera manufacturers, you've got the Sony, the Canon, and the Nikon. A lot of the same controls are the same on the different ones. You've got the big box in the middle, is they call that the hot shoe. That's where your flash or a trigger is going to attach to the camera that's going to trigger lights. You've got different dials and buttons that will control the different settings on the camera. Probably the most uniform thing you'll see is the shutter release button is up towards the front of the right where your index finger is going to push it. And everything else is designed to be operated by your thumbs with your hand. And what's not on the top of one camera will be on the back of it. So you should ideally have pretty much the same controls accessible on each camera. There are other camera makes, but these are probably what most people are shooting with. Here's the backs of the cameras where anything that was not on the top is going to be here also, and you've got different buttons and dials and switches to help you make the changes you want to make. On the digital cameras, you're going to have a screen back there that will show you what you're seeing. It'll give you a preview of the image you take, and it'll also take you through different menus where you can change the settings on the camera. You can set up some of the buttons to do what you want them to, give them custom settings, so you can make changes more quickly, or if they're more involved changes, you can drill down through the menus and make the changes that you wish to have. Here's an example of the different menus. They're pretty much the same as far as the way they're set up. You're going to have the cameras on the top. You've got the Canon and the Sony, where you've got the different categories along the top. You've got the little camera icon, autofocus, the playback, connectivity. And if you look at the Sony on the right-hand side, pretty much the same thing. They might be different icons, but the world, think of the World Wide Web, that's your connectivity menu. You've got your playback menu, and then down at the bottom, that's an icon screen where you've got pretty much the same icons, but they're on the left-hand side of the menu. But they're the shooting menu, video, playback, setup. You can do different things. No snide comments about the clean image sensor on the Nikon sensor. Thank you. Okay, the first leg of your exposure triangle is ISO or ASA. Again, that's your film speed, or how sensitive the sensor or the film is to light. You can go anywhere. The lowest native ISO I've seen on a camera is 64, 100, 200, and so on. And they go up. I don't even know what the new cameras are capable of now for high ISO. My camera will do a little over 25,000. 100,000 now, that doesn't surprise me. But as we were talking about with the triangle, there's trade-offs to whatever you do. You have the higher sensitivity with the higher ISO numbers, but it introduces a lot more grain and a lot more noise to your images. You've seen a grainy image, you know what they look like. And sometimes you want that effect, sometimes you don't. But the sensors have gotten a lot more advanced since they were before. We saw Kathy's picture of the Milky Way, and that was 6400 ISO, you said? And I didn't see much noise in that at all. That was pretty sharp. So between the camera itself and then the post-processing, you can do magical things with your images now. Basically, the intervals you see here, the 100 to 200 to 400, these are individual stops. When we talk about changes in exposure, it's usually a stop of light, and that's either double the light or half the light coming into your camera. And you can do that with, again, with the ISO. Shutter speed is the same thing. 1/100th of a second is half the shutter speed of 1/200th, and so on and so forth. And then the individual f-stops on your lens, 2.8, 4, 5.6, and 8. Those are individual full stops, and there are measures in between, measured in third of the stops that you can change the way the light's coming in. Again, here's a better example of the noise. You've got the lower ISO where the image is kind of sharp, and then you go up into the 6400, 12,800 range, and you can still see the shape, but it's pretty grainy. So that's the risk. You can go in, there's a couple different ways you can set your ISO. You can set it manually, and it depends on your camera. I think these, help me out here, Canon shooters. Those look like Canon menus to me, correct? Okay. There's your Canon menus, and then down at the bottom, okay, this is how you change on the different models. This is why I use the different ones. I don't think there's really an ISO button on a Canon, is there? You've got to go through the menu. Is there? Okay. I know on Sony and on Nikon's, you can change it from an outside button. And Canon, the only way I know how to do it is go through the menu itself. Oh, that's why.
This one right here.
Oh, slick. Okay. Okay. Well, there you go.
It's the M function button up.
It's the M function button on a Canon. Okay, there you go. And Tony said that you can change your shutter speed or ISO with that same button. So that would be how you do it. Okay, nice. Okay, the next leg of the triangle is your shutter speed, and again, this affects what you want to do with the action. You can use a fast shutter speed to stop action. You can use a slower shutter speed to give it any varying amount of blur. Starting from the left-hand side of this group, that's the slowest shutter speed. This is a trip that we took down to downtown Los Angeles tonight, and we took pictures of the cars going by, and that was the 66-second exposure. And the buildings are sharp because they're not moving, but the freeway, you've got the blur of the lights, and that makes a really nice effect. Next one over is a 50th of a second. That's out at Willow Springs with the race car going by. And panning with the car as it goes by, you can keep the car sharp and give the background a blur, and it shows motion. So again, you're using different settings to tell your story. Next step up, it's a little faster shutter speed, but it's still in the slower range. 1/125th of a second. You've got the airplane going by, and the plane is sharp, but you've got the blur in the propeller blades that kind of give the suggestion of motion. And especially in competition, if you enter a helicopter airplane picture and you've frozen those rotors or the propeller blades, the judges will hammer you. They don't want to see that. They want to see a suggestion of motion. But sometimes you do want the sharper capture, and you want to stop the motion. The plane on the right coming into LAX, it was framed against the Encounters restaurant there, and a slower shutter speed wouldn't have caught it in that framing area. So it depends on what you want to do with your image, whether you want to stop the motion or blur the motion. And again, here's the breakdown of shutter speeds. It's in a measure of a second. You get into faster shutter speeds, you're at 1,000th, 2,000th, 4,000th of a second. And then getting slower, again, they're full stops. You're cutting it in half. 1/500th, 1/250th, 1/125th is in the middle there, and then at some point it changes to 60th, 30th, and so on. But you see, the longer the shutter is open, the more light is coming into the camera, which again, you've got to compensate for that with your ISO or your aperture settings. But if you're changing your shutter speed, you're going to blur anything that's moving in the image. Again, the higher shutter speed, you're letting less light into the camera. When you open the lens iris, the more open the iris is, the lower the F number is. But the higher the F number, the higher your depth of field, and that's why you would control your f-stop. And we'll show that in a moment here. But again, also if you've got a slower shutter speed or higher shutter speed, you need to increase or decrease the ISO, which will change the sensitivity. So again, it's a trade-off on what you're changing. Here's illustrations of the aperture. You've got the different stop numbers. You'll see these on your lens, depending on what kind of lens you have. Some open wider than others, but f2.8, f4, 5.6, those are individual full stops when we talk about a stop worth of light. Again, the bigger the number, the smaller the opening. The smaller the opening, the more depth of field you have. So if you have a big number, you've got a big depth of field, but a small opening. If you have a small number, you have a big opening, but a smaller depth of field. So you just it's one of the ones you have to learn. It's not really correlated. It's a little different. Again, the function of the iris in your camera, same thing as your eye. It's allowing or blocking light from entering your camera. At the bottom there, you've got an illustration of how depth of field works. At f1.4, if you're focused on the person standing there, anything in the background is going to be blurred. Towards the middle of the range, f4, f5.6, the person is still sharp and the tree is getting a little sharper. And then in the higher F numbers, which is a smaller opening, you're going to get more that's in focus in your picture. Again, we keep repeating the exposure triangle, but it's important in photography because it's controlling the light, which is what photography is. And you can choose your depth of field based on what the story is you want to tell with your images. We've got the bee there coming in for a landing on the flower, where the bee and just part of that flower is in focus. That was the lens was wide open. That was a lower F number, so it's letting more light into the camera, as opposed to the shot down at the bottom, where you've got the foreground in focus, the middle ground in focus, and the background's in focus. That was a smaller opening, but a higher F number. So the main function of your aperture is controlling your depth of field. You can set your camera up on different priority modes that are going to allow you to control one or more of your settings in the camera. So basically, if you want to focus on one part of the exposure triangle, you set the camera to that priority mode, and then the camera figures out the exposure on its own based on what you tell it you want to do with your priority. Looks like we have a duplicate here. The priority modes are similar between Canon and Nikon. You've got AV as your aperture value or aperture. TV on Canon is S on the other manufacturers, and that's your shutter speed, or for Canon, it's the time value. M is for manual. That's where you have full control over what's going on. And we'll go over the other icons in a moment. And then down the bottom, you've got the Olympus, which pretty much the same thing. Aperture, shutter, and the different settings there. And there's your Sony priority modes, the same thing, manual, shutter, or aperture. Another thing you want to take into consideration with your settings on your cameras is you want to make sure that you are setting your camera for the proper type of light that you're photographing in. The white balance measures color temperature, and color temperature is measured in degrees of Kelvin. The higher the color temperature is, as far as the number, the cooler the pictures are going to look. The lower the color temperature, the warmer the colors are going to look. It's counterintuitive, but again, it's something you need to get through your head and remember. You've got the different scales down there. On the left-hand side, where you've got the higher color temperature numbers, clear blue sky is about as high as the scale goes, and those actually look like cooler colors. but it's higher color temperature. And you go down the scale, your cloudy sky and open shade. Noon sunlight, interestingly enough, is a little lower in color temperature than that, but that's because it's less refraction in the atmosphere, and the light's just a little different than it is when the sun's lower in the sky. Normal daylight's a little cooler than that. Electronic flash is lower temperature than that, and then you go down the list. Fluorescent light, you've seen it before in your old color film pictures. You take a picture on film that's meant for outside, indoors, and fluorescent light, it looks green, and that's why you need to compensate. Early in the morning, and then domestic or incandescent lighting, they're a little warmer. It's lower in the Kelvin scale, and then candle flame, gives you that nice warm light, and that's lower temperature. And the white balance is going to depend on your light source we saw before, and it also depends on what you're taking a picture of and the effect you want. When you're taking a picture of a person, you know what the person should look like as far as their skin tones. You've got the picture of upper left-hand corner. You've got the picture set for the wrong color balance, and it makes his skin look really weird, and you know that's not right. It's kind of a blue cast and cooler temperature, cool looking temperature, as opposed to the picture on the right. That's a lower Kelvin setting, but it gives you a warmer tone. And we know that's he shouldn't have blue skin. He's not a Smurf. But if you've got different things that, you've got the setting in the background that maybe the sky in the background, it doesn't look that bad, but you need to be careful what you're taking pictures of. Again, the color balance can set the mood. The warmer tone can be a little more calming. The cooler colors make it look a little later in the day, and it depends on how you want the scene to look. But again, if you've got a person with skin tones and hair tones and whatnot, the wrong color temperature can make it just look weird. That's not right. Your focus mode, this is where you tell your camera where you want it to focus. And it all depends on what you're taking a picture of and what you want to do with the pictures. If you're shooting a landscape, you can get away with a wider setting of where the camera's focusing and how many focus points your camera's going to use. The newer cameras now, it's ridiculous how many focus points they have that you can tell the camera to look. But if you're taking a picture of something, let's say you're taking the picture, we're out, sell a lot of bird pictures. If you've got the bird there, if you want to make sure it only focuses on that bird, if you put your pinpoint focus or single point focus on that bird, it doesn't care what's around the bird. It's going to make sure that bird stays in focus. So your different cameras have different ways where you can set how many points of focus you're using and where to put it. And then if you have the pinpoint or the single point, you can actually move it. You can move the box around in your camera and tell you where to look for it. Like if you're predicting something coming into a frame and you want to be in this part of your picture, when it comes in the frame, you hold it there. It's gonna hold the focus for you. Some of the newer cameras actually have predictive mode. It kind of knows what you're taking a picture of, and it kind of tries to guess what you want in focus, and it'll pick up a moving subject for you. There's different ways. I think that picture on the upper left got slid over to the side and shouldn't have been. There's different ways you can set the camera to focus. Again, we've got the AFC on the one at the bottom. Upper left-hand corner, you can still see where it says AI Servo. That's where it's going to track what you're taking a picture of. If there's a bird or a dog, or I've heard some people shoot airplanes. I don't know. It'll track. If you hold the button down, it will predict what the subject's doing, and it will keep track of the focus as you go. Or you can keep it in one single place. So if you want, like when we have the pictures of something moving in the background, we had the train moving behind Dawn at the train station. Kathy had the single point focused on Dawn. She kept it there, and the camera didn't care what the train was doing in the background. It kept him in focus. You can set up manual focus where you make the decision and you decide what you want in focus and leave the camera out of it. Obviously, you don't really want to do that on faster moving subjects. You don't have the time sometimes to focus where you want to. And we covered subject recognition where it sees what's coming in the brain. Here are the different nomenclature, the different names that the camera manufacturers use for the different modes. Nikon is AFS, which is single. Canon is one shot. Sony calls it the single shot autofocus. And then the continue autofocus mode is either continuous or the servo mode. And Nikon calls that AFC for continuous. Canon calls it AI servo. And then Sony also calls it continuous. And I'm not sure about the other manufacturer, but I would presume that they're going to be similar. Again, this is when you would want to use your different modes in low light situation. Maybe you want to focus the camera. You want to tell the camera where to focus, because if there's not enough light for the camera itself to pick up on what's going on, it might need a little bit of your help. But you got a table here for the different modes and how they work, when you want to use them. Your single autofocus, it's the most basic. Your camera just locks focus on the subject that you've put that sensor on and told it, I want you to focus here. And if the subject moves, you're going to have to move that sensor and focus it again. Again, you want to use this on something that's moving kind of slow, like mountains or houses, or portraits, somebody sitting still. And it's effective for that. In autofocus continuous or the servo mode, again, you're going to put your sensor or the little focus block on what you're taking a picture of. And if it moves, your sensor should follow along with it and keep your subject in focus. And it'll continue to track the subject even if it moves around the frame. And the efficiency of the mode depends on a lot of factors. The subject's movement, if it's like my camera has airplane and bird mode, birds are a little more erratic and they bounce around more than a plane's going to be more sweeping. So it depends on with the camera kind of thinks it knows what it's seeing. So you would set that based on what you're taking a picture of. And again, this is going to be good for wildlife or sports in action. You've got a player, if you're at a ball game, whether it be baseball, football, soccer, you've got a player running by in the field. They're pretty much going to take the same track, so it'll know where it's going. And then the automatic autofocus modes or hybrid modes, you might have a set where it's partially servo mode, but it can pick up on the subject if it's moving, and you've got a set for that. Some of the newer cameras have eye detection if you're taking portraits, where you just point at the subject and you push the button, and it recognizes the subject's eye and it locks onto the eye real quick. And that's really nice if you're doing headshots and people are coming and going and coming and going. Saves you a lot of time and hassle. And here's where your different subject detection modes are going to be based on your camera. You've got the Sony in the upper left-hand corner. They've got little pictures of the things to denote. You've got the race car, which is going to be for something moving fast, airplane mode. You've got the car, birds, a little cat picture for wildlife. Nikon's there on the left-hand side, same kind of thing. Auto, auto, that's confusing. Auto is automatic, and basically it's going to look at the overall scene and kind of try to guess what you want to take a picture of based on the movement inside the frame. And then you've also got people. Again, it recognizes facial features and will take pictures. Birds, vehicle would be like an automobile, and same thing, it's going to look for something moving and lock on that. And then airplanes, it starts calling you Shirley. And then the picture on the right is the Canon menu, and you go through the different menus there. The Canon shows the eye detection, you can enable it. And that's actually a pretty neat trick. Excuse me. You've got several metering modes on your cameras based on what you want to do with your image. And here you've got the three major manufacturers and Hasselblad thrown in just for fun. You've got evaluative metering on the Canon, which is matrix metering on Nikon, and multi-pattern metering on a Sony. And then center weighted on the Hasselblad. That basically kind of gives you an overall of what's in the whole frame. Center weight is exactly what it sounds like. Whatever's in the middle of your frame, that's what's it's gonna give you the meter, the light values on that, and you adjust your camera based on that. So if your subject's dead center in the middle or towards the middle, you tell your camera you want to pay attention to the exposure there, and it'll either make the background lighter or darker depending on what's going on. But your subject that you told it to track will be metered properly. Spot metering is a little more precise. Center weight, you might have a person in the middle of it, but if you have spot metering, like Sandy was doing with the picture of Dave, trying to do the Rembrandt lighting, she's going to focus on that patch of light on his face, and we want to focus just on that one. And so that would have been what you want to use there. Partial metering, highlight weighted, it depends on what you want to do with the image. Like on Sandy's picture, you go with the highlight weighted because you don't want to blow out those highlights. You want those to maintain the density. You can make the shadows a little darker, and that's fine, but you want to maintain the detail in those lights. And here's an illustration of what the different metering modes do. It's basically what part of the image do you want the camera to evaluate. If you've got the matrix metering, it gives you the overall scene of what you're taking a picture of. On your center weighted metering, again, it's what's in the middle of the frame, and then spot metering is a little more precise. That's pretty much the exposure and focus. I mean, those are the basic functions of your camera. And again, they should all be the same on most models, but they'll be just in different places, and you might have to go through and hunt for them and find them. But once you do a little practice, you're going to be able to find them quickly. One major suggestion I make, and I've done this ever since I learned about it, and you want to do the same thing. You want to go into your camera, you want to find out how you can set and maintain your copyright information. The Nikon in the left-hand corner gives the information. You can put your contact information and the name. You've got the Canon on the left, same kind of thing. You've got the author and the copyright. You change the year every year. Some of you shoot on New Year's. And then there's Sony at the upper right-hand corner. And what that does is when you take a picture, it embeds your copyright information into your metadata, and it offers you a little bit of protection. Nothing's foolproof. If somebody wants to steal your picture, they can steal your picture, but this makes it a little tougher. Some of the better labs you have, if you send a picture in that's not your image, they actually look at the metadata. Metadata was where I was trying to earlier. They're going to look at the metadata, and they're going to look for your name. And I've actually had them contact me and let me, you can see where they found it was my picture that somebody was printing. So you want to keep track on that. Your cameras can do a couple, 3 different formats. The main ones are RAW and JPEG. Yeah.
To when the change. And so you'll change your camera and type change, and then you take some pictures on your cell phone and some on your camera, and you put them in time order on your computer. They're not. So make sure your time is also accurate. So it can cause all.
Nope, good point. Thank you. Your camera can do several formats. The 2 most popular and more common you're going to see are JPEG and RAW. There's good things and bad things depending on what you want to do with them. As a rule, artistically speaking, personally, I shoot RAW on all of them because that maintains the most amount of data. Most cameras will do different sizes of RAW. You can have small, medium, and large. JPEG, you can also choose different sizes. The trade-off is with RAW format, you have more information there, but it takes longer for it to write to your camera or for your computer to process or anything because there's more data there. If you're out shooting, I know people go out and shoot events where they could maybe have a support staff there. I have a friend who does equestrian events, the show jumping and whatnot, and they put photographers around the arena, and the photographers are just shooting, and they just hand their cards, they swap cards with people, and the people are processing them on site, or Kevin Carson's come up and spoken with us. He would shoot football games, baseball games, where he needed to get his images to his newspaper right then and there. He's shooting JPEG. He doesn't want to have to monkey with RAW. He takes the picture and sends it immediately to his client. And that's JPEGs are faster, but it's not as high a resolution. And here are the different manufacturer screens with how you would change your settings between the different formats. Sometimes you'll want to shoot both. If you've got a dual card camera, it'll write to both, which again takes a little time, but you've got them both there on site. Here's kind of a breakdown. There's probably more data than you wanted, but it gives you an idea of how the different formats and the size of the formats correlate to each other and what you can do with them. In your JPEG, you've got the higher image quality. You've got the largest JPEG. In this case, it's going to give you 22 megapixel capture. It's the file size itself is going to be 7 meg, and the card, I'm not sure how big this card is in the example, but based on an 8 gigabyte card, you can capture, see, 1930 shots on that size card of that size of a JPEG. RAW, you've got the small, medium, and large. Again, they're a little bigger. Your big RAW file, that's going to be a 22 megapixel capture. For your sensor size, that's going to give you a 27.1 megabyte file before you even start editing it. So again, there's trade-offs. The more data it is, the longer it's going to take for the camera to write to that card. So if you've got a smaller card or a slower camera, you're going to slow down the whole process. And if you're shooting a burst, you're going to get to a point where they call it overshooting the camera, where your camera can't record the data as fast as it's coming in. And you're going to be in a situation where you want to keep shooting and the camera can't write as fast as you want it to. And then the size of the file also affects of how big you can print it, as you see kind of in the middle. And we've all gone through that where we try to print something and it just doesn't print right because it's too small of a file for what we want to print. Again, we've talked about different, some cameras have multiple slots, some cameras shoot multiple card formats. You've got the camera in the bottom that has dual slots, two different kinds on the left-hand side, and the card on the right is shooting two of the same card. And different cards come in different sizes, different speeds. Obviously, the bigger the card and the faster the card, the more expensive they're going to be. I know a lot of people that keep the same camera in their card and they keep shooting until it's full. Yes, sir. Hit me. Huh? You can tell the camera where to shoot it, and you can change that, in the middle of your day, depending on what you want to do. You can also set up the camera where it shoots simultaneously. It'll record, here is RAW, here is JPEG. Personally, I keep my dual setup. I keep the second card as an overflow. Once this card is full, it starts writing over here. As far as keeping large cards and filling them up, that scares me. That kind of comes to the head of keeping all your eggs in one basket. If that card fails, you've lost everything. So a lot of people I carry 3 or 4 or 5 different cards with me, just in case. And if I've shot a lot on one card, I'll swap it out. So if your card does fail on you, you don't lose everything that you shot that day. So it just depends on your comfort level. Again, how big, how fast, it's all a matter of money. The size, the type and the speed. I looked at B&H this morning while I was doing this, and you've got the different types of cards. An SDXC card, 256 gigabyte card from Lexar, is $280 for a 2-pack, and those are The write speed, and you want to watch your write speed versus your read speed. They usually advertise their read speed because that's a higher number and it looks better, but you want to make sure you understand what you're getting. On this particular card, your read speed is 250 megabytes per second, but the write speed's only 120 megabytes per second. So you want to be real sure what you're getting. The write speed is how quickly your camera is putting the data on there as you're shooting. The read speed is how quickly whatever it is you're using to take the images off of your card can pull it off the card. The Sony card, 120 gig XQD card is 440 megabytes read, 400 megabytes write, and those are just shy of $200 a piece. That's the card that my Nikon uses, and Chris Broughton does love pointing out that my camera uses Sony cards. SanDisk 128 gig CF Express card are 1,700 megabytes per second read and 1,200 megabytes seconds write, and those are 160 each. That's pretty quick. And obviously they're bigger size than this, but I tried to compare apples and apples on this. Your camera has different drive modes that can change how quickly you're taking pictures. You can go single frame, you push the button, that's one image. You push the button, that's one image. And then they can have varying degrees of multi-frame, high and low speed, 3 frames a second, 4 frames a second, 20, 30 frames a second. And also this depends on the format you're shooting. You can have a camera that shoots full RAW at 20 or 30 frames per second, or it can shoot JPEGs at 120 frames per second, which at that point is video. So again, it depends on what you're taking pictures of and what you want to do with them. The cameras will also have self-timer modes, and they can vary in times, 2 second, 10 second, and that's where you're taking the picture of the group and you want to be in it. You put it on the tripod, and push the button and run back, and you're all bowling pins. You get in there to jump in the picture with everybody. Your camera can have different modes. We kind of touched on this at the beginning. We discussed the shutter priority and the aperture priority and then the manual mode. You can also set it on auto mode. A is for auto. It's not for awesome like I thought it was. And so I learned that. Automatic, it's a one size fits all. If you're out shooting in the same conditions, you're out in bright sunlight and you're not going to get any changes. The camera makes its best guess on what you want to take a picture of, and it's best to give you the best exposure for that. You can have also different modes that mean different things, and they'll have different pictures to kind of give you a hint on what they are. Sand and snow mode, you've got the snowflake there. Portrait mode, landscape, sports, nights, no flash. I have no idea what child mode is, but okay. And we'll discuss the different modes and what they do. Your portrait mode is going to use shallow depth of field to kind of help you emphasize your subject. It's going to blur the background out. If you tell you want to focus on the person, it's going to focus on that person. A landscape mode is going to give you a higher depth of field. It will probably be a slower shutter speed because the landscape's not moving. So you want the more of a depth of field than you do shutter speed with the landscape. Your macro mode is also going to be a shallower depth of field because you want to allow more light into it because you're closer to your subject, and it lets you focus closer on the image. Your sport mode is going to give you a higher shutter speed to catch the action of what you're taking a picture of. If you want to freeze the action, we talked about the different blurs on different things to make an effect, but sport mode presumes you want the higher shutter speed to freeze the action. And so it's going to sacrifice your ISO and your aperture to make sure you have a faster shutter speed. And then in the nighttime mode, it's a higher ISO and a slower shutter speed, and it'll be a wider aperture to help you record a darker scene. It doesn't worry about the shutter speed because it's going to presume if you're shooting at it, you probably have a tripod or have it up on something. The lesser used, lesser known camera modes, no flash. You can turn that off. The flash will not fire regardless of what's going on. That's good at night, so you don't either completely wash out the subject you take a picture of. You don't want to blind your neighbors if you're out in a group. if you're at museums, a lot of places will specify no flash photography. So if you turn the flash function off in your camera, you'll be able to shoot there. Panorama again gives you a wider depth of field. Sometimes it'll actually change the how the image is recorded on either your image or on your sensor for digital camera. I actually have a Minolta film camera that there's a panorama switch in the bottom that it actually makes it shoots across 2 frames of film and it blocks off the top and the bottom of the frame, but it gives you a nice panorama. Those are kind of fun to play with. Your snow and sand mode, those are gonna compensate for really bright conditions. When you're shooting in sand or the snow, you get a lot of reflected light coming back at you, and it'll tone down the image on your camera and kind of help mitigate the high contrast conditions where you're shooting. I am a huge fan of education. There's lots of free education out there for the choosing. Organized education I'm a huge fan of that. PSA offers different education courses you can go through for free. There's also paid ones. PPA has PhotoVision is a new program they started where they have a whole bunch of different topics and people talking about different things. You know, I'm a product of the Antelope Valley College. I love the program. I love the people who are there. They got me where I am now. They have a commercial photography course program that's worth its weight in gold. You can get your degree from YouTube University and just do a deep dive and start checking YouTube for the information you want on that. Be very careful on that though. Anybody and their brother is putting up YouTube content and they're influencers and they know what they're talking about. No, trust me, no, don't trust them. Go to reliable sources, look at how many followers they have, get word of mouth, ask your friends, ask people in this room, and they'll give you, we all have our favorite YouTube presenters, and you go with them. Only go with reliable sources. Either manufacturers will sponsor different people. So if you're shooting Canon, who does Canon sponsor? Who are the presenters they sponsor? I'm sorry? They're called Explorers of Light, and you could take their information to the bank. If they're representing Canon, you know they're going to know what they're talking about. That's it for me. There's my contact information. If you ever have any questions, don't be afraid to give me a shout. Photography is fun. It gives me a chance to go be with people. This was the bottom right-hand picture is a picture at the imaging conference through PPA in Texas, and that was all the Californians that were in the. No, you know that was Louisville. I'm lying to you. That's Kentucky. But that was all the Californians that were there. You go across the country and you hang out with people that you have here, and then you also get to meet new people. There's people in that crowd I hadn't met before, and I still contact them. And they, again, same thing with people in this room. Talk to each other, help each other. That's what we're here for. Questions, comments, tomatoes? Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. I believe, and if anybody knows, correct me, I think it's function because it has to do with the number, the f-stop number is a function of the ratio between the actual opening and the total size of the lens, the diameter of the lens versus the diameter of the iris that's open. And I knew at one time, but I don't know what the math is. Yeah.
Was it on the test?
Well,
PPA test?
it's kind of whether you get senses. With all the newer cameras like there's. If you're used to it, DSLRs. Went to the newer camera, they have new features, for like exposure triangle. And I was wondering what people, if you're setting it on manual. And you want to be able to control all 3 areas, aperture, shutter speed and ISO. And these new cameras have programmable dials and for example, the lens lens ring programmable, you got, like in this case, you have a dial in the back, and the dial next to the, aperture, not, the shutter button.
Uh-huh.
What would be a good, what would you program? Like, would you use aperture for the, lens, for the ring, the lens ring, shutter speed for the dial, next to the, shutter button, and then the ISO for the one on the back, or, for the dial near the back.
Oh, as far as setting up a custom setting on the camera,
Yeah.
so you talk, you know what, that's gonna be personal preference.
Well, that's what I'm gonna. What,
Personally, I left mine a factory setting. What, anybody else? Did any of you guys change yours so you could change it? Right. Okay. Right.
But I'm shooting you.
Right.
what about these cameras that follow the photographer's eye? How, is that pretty accurate, or is it still needing?
It's really,
The ones I've seen are really accurate. Yeah, it's scary.
yeah. It does it for people, it does it for animals.
No, I mean, or the photographer's eye.
Oh, the.
But you know,
Oh, you eyepiece.
Following your head. Follow.
You get.
I was wondering if that's accurate, or still has yet to be perfected, or?
I'm sure it'll get better as time goes on. I've not seen it with the eye detect as far as the photographers.
Does
You know, some are to. How- But I was just wondering, if somebody else had it,
like there was,
you see it? Huh?
I said my camera's old,
Oh, you can.
apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I follow the photographer's eye.
Yeah.
That's tricky.
Wow.
Yeah. You.
Ah,
Right, no. And it's huge an advantages. Looking on bird's eye, with pig, animal,
Right.
because you're active focusing. So good.
what was the, manufacturer that was, yeah,
Canon.
The one I had,
Kenny?
but I
Really?
don't.
Ah,
I gave a break to broke that.
no, I'm,
And was not. Yeah.
oh, sure.
It's all fine, whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Well, anything else? Professor Meyer says I'm either that good or that bad. How do we minimize this? So I look, see if we have any online question. Is it state?
See. And then just close your.
I see John. Hi, John. Any questions from Ridgecrest or Las Vegas? All right, well, thank you. I hand over back to Kathy.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, so, how many of you brought your cameras with you and want to figure out where some things are or how to do certain things? We probably should break up into manufacturer groups, maybe? That'd be a good thing. Okay, so, I guess Canon over here, Nikon over there, and
So
Sony in the middle. Is there any others? Any others? Okay, does that sound good?